Hi, everyone. I want to talk a little bit more about associations here. There have been some questions on Campus Wire. You haven't seen all of them because people are posting their code as part of the homework, and so they're not making these public posts. There's a bit of confusion with what the associations do for you. We've gotten so used to, we've got this database and we're going to write queries and we're going to get back rows. Okay. And to a certain extent, you've seen that tutorial and some of the other practice that we've done so far with active record models, where we take the model name and then we form what is kind of like an SQL query, and we get back a collection. All right, now this collection is also known as an active record relation. And you go, oh yeah, so it's kind of like I get a table back. I get a bunch of rows back. Oh, it's like what I did before. It's kind of like that, but not really, because you're not getting rows back. You're getting objects back. Each row in our entity tables are represented by an object, okay? And then that object gives us easy access to the attributes of that entity, of that table, okay? And that was what we saw with a single model, and I think people kind of get it, or they're able to program with it and they're not too confused. Now in homework, it's 7, we've gone to a full-on schema. We've got lots of tables, lots of relationships, and we're adding associations. And people are a bit confused. There is a lecture that's really important where I talk about adding methods to our models. And in that, I discuss for you the difference between a class method, also known as a static method, and an instance method. Okay? Please take a look at it. I've talked with, for example, Professor Hancock. In MSCI 240, he says, he talks about these things in MSCI 121, and it's a difficult concept for a lot of students to get and to understand the difference between a static method on a class and an instance method. Take a look at that video. That video, again, shows you that when we use the class name, which is what you were doing when you did things with querying the database so far, you're doing static methods, class methods. We use these to return us an object or a bunch of objects. Usually we do this of that class. And so we can query, for example, we've got this book class here, which is a model. We get to do things like book.all. That's a static class method. I mean, if you wanted to, you could write some parentheses there. And we're calling it on this class book. That's not an object in the way that you're used to thinking about objects. So we're calling it on this class name, all right, as opposed to, so let's say I go ahead and I go with book.first. So book.first goes to the books table that the model is attached to and takes the first row out of it, and it returns me an object. So I can go and assign that to B. B is of type book. Now that I have B, we'll take a look here. I can do things like, if I wanted to change B's title, I could. This is the new book. I don't know. All right. I could change its title. All right. Now, B is in memory. If I want to be sure that it's been saved to the database, I can call b.save. So now I'm sure that that title has been written out and saved to the database. You can do this sort of thing in the Rails console. So within your directory for your Rails app, run Rails console. If you don't want to actually change the database, but you want to play around with it, give it the option -- sandbox. All right, and then when you exit Rails console, all the changes will be thrown away that you've made to the database. So you can do this, and then you can type this, and this, and actually go, and you'll see when you actually trigger the query that changes the database and things along those lines. All right. Class method. This is an instance method. This is the title method. This is an instance method. Okay, the save method. It's operating on an instance, an actual little object that we have to represent a single book. This is on the class. We have a whole bunch of methods there to help us get and fetch objects. So this is a real big distinction to make between these. On the homework, I'm not asking you to write class methods. I'm asking you to write a bunch of instance methods. I'm asking you to add new methods to the model that are about the individual object. Okay, so you're going to call it on an object, and you'll always have that object available to you inside that method. It's just like when you've done all your other object-oriented programming in Java. So you'll have access to a book's title inside of the methods, the instance methods that you write on that class. All right, so but I really wanted to talk about associations here. Let's get back. I'm obviously jumping around a little bit here. So associations. So here's a segment of the schema. Let's just say that this is our schema at the moment. So we've got books as an entity set. We have reading lists as an entity set. And they have a relationship many to many between them. Okay, a book can have 0 or more reading lists, and a reading list can have 0 or more books. Okay, these translate very easily to a schema, and there'll be a join table. This join table has no attributes on it, so you'll see I don't have anything hanging off of it, and so we don't make a model for this in Rails. All we're going to do is have a means to connect these tables in Rails. They're connected in the database via the join table, but we need to tell Rails about this so that we can be all cool with our object relational mapping. And that's what we're doing here. So we've got a book model and a reading list model. Why are they models? It's because they inherit from application record. And when we write the less than sign and then application record, the magic happens and it knows, ooh, I'm going to go find a table in my database named books and one named reading lists. All right. And I'm going to suck up these attributes and I'm going to make methods, instance methods for you so that you can read and set the title and year and name. You can get the IDs too. You can change the IDs. You're ill-advised. You shouldn't be changing the IDs. Basically, once we create an object, it should hold on to its ID forever. Those are the primary keys. All right, so that's great. That's what those lines do. That gives us all that functionality, and then it gives us all those class methods, and we can query and get books and get reading lists and stuff like that. Do all those sorts of things to get them to then use them. But how, if we had a book, how could we find out who its reading lists are? Or if we had a reading list, how could we find the books on the reading list? Well, that's what we've done here. This is an association. So this is one of them. This lets us set up a many-to-many relationship through a join table. All right. We don't name the join table. All right. We have carefully made the join table with a name built out of the reading lists. and the books, so that Rails is actually able via convention to figure out what the join table is in the database. If we hadn't chosen the name of our join table, the join table is not named onList. This is an ERD schema. If we hadn't named it carefully, we would have to specify something in this method call here, because this is really, we're calling a method here. Anyway, we would have to specify, oh, please find the join table named this to do the join. Okay, but we didn't, because we named it all special when we made the homework. So what does this do for us? Well, the really big thing is, so let's say we have a reading list. I'll say RL is, I can go in here, reading lists, reading list dot, I'll take the first reading list, okay? Just to give us an object. So now I've got a reading list. And the really amazing thing about this reading list stuff is now, you know what? I can do things like the following. I can do, take the reading list, and I can go books. Whoa, that's because I said it has many books. And so it made a method named books for me that allows me to access all of the books via the join table that we create for it. You do this, do it in the console, all right? And you will see, so I can, let's say I could actually do this to be like book. So let's say I'm going to say that this is, I don't have a good name for it right now, and I don't want to be confused. I'll just use my classic. I'll just call it Fred. I don't know. And I'll go reading list dot books. All right. You do this. What it's going to do is this reading list, remember, is an object. So we've got some reading list. It references off to some object the reading list has in it. It has an ID, and it has in it a name. That's the data that we know that's sitting there. And you know what? It's going to say, books for reading list. How am I going to do? Well, I know my ID. Let's say the ID was 1. All right. I'm going to go and query the database now for you. And I'm going to say, select star from books and whatever the join table is, where, and it's going to join on the join table where the reading list has an ID of 1. It's going to just do the query for you. And you're going to get back all the reading lists. So Fred is going to contain a collection of reading lists. And so you can even do things like, you could do puts, you'll see, we could do puts Fred.length. And we could output for ourselves, you can do this in the console, whatever you want, how many books are on the reading list for that, this is the type of thing that we're able to do. We're able to work within the world of, we have all these objects, and the objects all know about each other now, and we can access them just like they're a bunch of friendly objects. Books, they contain reading lists, and we can access them via the books. We can, if we've got a reading list in hand, we can talk to that reading list as an object and say, who are your books? We could change the books on that reading list, all sorts of things. That's what you're doing inside of you're creating with your database seeds, your dev data. You're actually accessing those individual objects, and you're saying, add this thing to this object via the association. Okay? Now I hope this helps. Again, start going into the Rails console, and once you've got the database there, you've put some data in it, and you've wired things up with the associations so that the different models know about each other, play around with them, and distinguish between calling class methods from calling instance methods. All right? And when you write a method for your class, you'll have to distinguish between the two as well. So go check out that video again about adding methods to our models. What talks about the difference between class methods and instance methods. All right.